So, the first time I'd ever seen drum corps, I was in 7th grade and I was just joining the high school marching band because they allowed members to join from 7th on because we couldn't get enough people to be in the band. So when I was in 7th grade, I walk into the band room for band camp and I was there maybe 30 minutes early, and there were already a handful of, I believe there were brass members, and they were just playing, I believe it was 2002 DCI finals, and it was just Cavaliers frameworks, and it was the coolest thing I had ever seen. But at that time, I don't recall being able to, tell a difference between the 12th place corps to the first place corps. They were all great. They were all amazing, and I was instantly hooked. I would say I was into it pretty heavily right away. I don't think it was necessarily always a goal of mine between that point to when I actually did start to march drum corps. There was actually a time when I made my first drum corps, and this was in 2008 with Reading Buccaneers, and we were approaching our spring preview performance, and I was still in high school. I had a girlfriend. I wanted to go to prom. I wanted to go to the Jersey Shore for the weekend. And so what I did was I quit the Reading Buccaneers because I still wanted to be a high school kid and have a life. So then, fast forward a little bit, maybe a few weeks, I had been getting emails, phone calls. They just wanted to hear me out on why I wanted to leave, and they wanted me to come back, luckily. I think any other group, they would have just been like, okay, let's find somebody else. But for some reason, I was lucky enough that these people were persistent enough to draw me back in. But what happened was I had my high school drumline audition at the high school. It was like a normal 6 to 9 rehearsal, and my high school instructor marched Reading Buccaneers. He was the one who got me to even try out there in the first place. And 2 hours goes by. It's around 8 o'clock. We have an hour left of rehearsal, and he just goes, okay, we're gonna pack up rehearsal right now. I'm gonna send everybody home but Frankie. And he just looked at me, and then all the kids left, and he shuts the door, and he just completely destroyed me with words. Not in a negative way, obviously. It was in a motivational way. But he was basically telling me how stupid I was for making the choices I wanted to make because of my potential. And he was smart enough to see that, and I was a kid and I wasn't. The first DCI World Class Corps I marched was Crown. Yes, that was 2010. So, the big hype that summer in 2009 was Carolina Crown. They were the cleanest drumline anyone has seen that summer. They played the most amount of notes I think I had ever heard in my life at that point, and it was pretty together, and I was very impressed. Honestly, I didn't think I would be able to play those notes, but I went anyway. But the funny thing is, Crown was a 10-hour drive from my house, and the cadets had a camp 10 minutes away from my house. And I decided, I'm going to drive 10 hours to try for Carolina Crown. Because that drumline from 2009, I mean, they blew me away. I didn't know how I would be in that drumline, but I knew I wanted to be. And so I go to the camp, and I'm not expecting to be good at all. Compared to, I had no idea who was coming into this audition. And I remember I saw kids that were, they seemed like they had it in with the staff even. These kids are they're from Dartmouth, or these kids are from Blue Stars. You got all these kids from all these places, and no one knew who I was. I just drove 10 hours to go to this camp and audition for this drumline that I wanted to be in. And we get to the end of the camp, and Lee Bettis pulls me and 2 other people into the same room we did our snare auditions in. It was me, Oliver Delato, and Jackson Landry. And all 3 of us ended up getting spots that year. But I remember they said to us at the end of the camp, they were like, listen, if you guys come back next camp and you're fully prepared, everything is smooth, you guys have a spot. Basically, just don't blow this, is pretty much what they said. Like, I tried out for cadets in 2009, and I missed the first camp, so I showed up to the second camp. And so they didn't really get a good look at me. They knew I had a little bit of drum corps experience. At that point, I had marched 1 season with the Reading Buccaneers. But yeah, so I go to this camp. It's the December camp. And that year, they were getting ready to do the inaugural parade for, I believe it was Barack Obama, right, 2009. So they were doing that, and they called back 12 snare drummers to the January camp. And those 12 snare drummers got to be in the inaugural parade, despite if they made the drum line or not. So I thought that was really cool, except I knew that I wanted to still march the Reading Buccaneers. I felt like there was something for me to learn while being a vet of a drum line. I felt like I could gain experience that would allow me to be a little more mature, maybe, going in. And maybe I didn't understand it to that degree at that point, but I knew that it was the right move for me to make. So I did that. So I didn't go back to cadets in January. I just said I was going to march Reading Buccaneers again. And I did, and I was on the end for 2 years in a row, and they do things differently there. I don't want to get into all that, blah, 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 but. So, drum corps speaking, I did 2 summers with the Reading Buccaneers. My first summer was in 2008, and then 2009. So I was a junior and a senior in high school at that point. And then I went on and marched Carolina Crown in 2010, 11, and 12. And then I rooked out at the Bluecoats in 2013. Well, the first thing I would address is being a section leader. Your only job is to make sure that the relationship between the drum line and the staff is smooth, in a sense of where you can ensure that the drum line is going to operate to the level where the staff feels like they can be productive. You know what I mean? So I think a big common misconception with being a section leader is I'm the section leader and I need to do all these things, and now I have all of these responsibilities. And now you get into this weird territory where you're just trying to like dip your hands in everything. You know what I'm saying? So I would say being a section leader means you just need to be the best example. And as far as being vocal goes, I would say just do it when you absolutely need to. And try to remain neutral and calm, but always ensure that, like, trust yourself. That's why you're put in that position, because you probably have the intuition to lead the group in, directions that the staff would want you to. So I think you do need to trust yourself. You need to not overthink it. You need to not overly control people, right? You just need to ensure that it's going to flow between the members and the staff. Being a rookie section leader, that was rather intimidating. I had a decent amount of experience going into it, but I was obviously very new to the drum corps. Luckily, the whole snare line was new, so I didn't really have to worry too much about that. But it was the other sections of the drum corps where I knew that, okay, what I do and when I do it completely matters. And I have to make sure that I have a feel of how things work here in comparison to where I came from. And that's another interesting thing. Where I came from, I wasn't the section leader. So I was just in the drum line doing my thing, right? Doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And then I get to Bluecoats. It was funny, we were actually supposed to have 2 vets that season, Jay and Joe Woody. And coincidentally, somehow they ended up getting the same injury where a tendon somewhere in their hand, it had to do with maneuvering their thumb back and forth, I believe, but it just completely ruptured. And they ended up having to get reconstructive surgery, and they had to like pull a tendon out of one finger and like put it in the thumb. It was this whole crazy thing. And he ended up marching again, which was cool. But that summer, it was those 2 vets, and then we get to April camp, and they're like, okay, these guys are out, you're in. And I remember Mike Jackson, I think it was at WGI headquarters, is when he officially told me I was going to be the section leader of the drum line. And that was after 2013 WGI, right? So Man in the Arena. So that was really cool to experience. But I look for people that are attentive, right? Like they show a clear sense of focus. But I also look for the people who have the ability to put that genuine performance vibe behind what they're doing, because that is what we look for at Crown. Like I would say at Bluecoats, what the little bit of time we had with Mike Jackson, I learned that he really tries to, at least it comes off this way, he tries to take advantage of what people naturally have, and he's like, oh, well, like, this is kind of primal almost in a sense, so I'm gonna like use this as an advantage to kind of like portray a message, right? And then you have like the complete opposite side of the spectrum where people are so technical behind what they're doing, it's very square, right? It loses that musical edge to it, right? It's just generated. You see what I'm saying? It's a robot generating something. So I think at Crown we look for the best of both worlds, if I'm being honest. Like, we can still be genuine and we can still like express ourselves in a musical way while also being very defined with what we're doing. And because honestly, you consider the majority of the points that you gain, and I'm not trying to say we do this for points, but the majority of points that we do get are from the box, right? So I think it's important to understand that you need to be effective to the box, right? And what looks clean sounds clean. If I can't hear it from however many yards away that is, if I could see that it looks clean from afar, my brain's gonna tell me that it sounds good. You know what I'm saying? So I'm looking for that like sensibility where we have that awareness, but we're contributing in a genuine way, but also like I'm dialed in to the heights and the definitions and the people around me and the sounds, right? It's who can handle all of those responsibilities in a weekend, right? And that's why we have more than one audition, because there's not many people that can do that. So you have to see who can learn how to do that. The best piece of advice I would say is be able to recognize what the expectation is. You have to understand what the level of musicality is, physicality is, all of those things. How far are we willing to go with this? Okay? And I would say to anyone who is young, and you may have the best educator in the world in front of you, you may have no teacher in front of you, right? But I think it's important that you understand that the goal is what those sounds are and what effect that music has behind your practicing versus any bit of information anybody could ever give you, right? The things that I tell high school students today, it's not information that I knew when I was 15, but I was 16 and I was marching drum corps, right? Because, at the end of the day, I was always crafting my hands into that sound and into that look. And you know, I was also in the process of understanding how, you know, those two things go together, right? I would never tell you to look good if it's not going to have a positive effect on your sound. I wouldn't waste my time, right? At the end of the day, it's the sound. So you need to latch on to what that professional sound is, and you just gotta, there's nothing to it but drumming it, right? We get so caught up in like, what's this exercise? What does this work on? Like, have you ever just played paradiddles for the entire duration of a song and just listened to like the 16th notes? You know what I'm saying? Like, not like, oh, I'm playing paradiddles, I'm playing stickings. Like, listen to the space in between the notes for an entire rep, an entire song. And then listen to the volume for the entire song. And then look at the shape of your hands for the entire song. You see, like, I watch a high school drum line. Okay, we're going to learn 16 counts of drill. We're going to put 16 counts of music, standing still. Okay, now we're going to do it on the move. What happens? It's a mess. Why? Because high school kids don't know their music. Okay, and it's nothing. It has nothing to do with their preparation on the music. It's because it's a level of drumming, right? It's like how well you're able to produce what you're doing, right? That completely dictates the level of focus you can apply to the reps. See what I'm saying? So if you don't know, if you're just not good at drums, and we're gonna go 16 counts here with the music, with the drill, you're gonna think about those 16 counts as a million things, right? So I would reverse engineer my thinking. I would say, get the -1, get the sticks up, play beat 1 perfectly, right? Because you get yourself into those very specific, like, waves of thought. You're going to allow your brain to get to those things that you're worried about, right? And honestly, if your flam drags are a little closed or a little light on beat 2, blah, 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 like, honestly, you got to take a step back and look at the big picture. Like, is that really the goal of what we're doing? Or is it, like, to be able to operate at a mature level, right? You get the big picture correct, which to me, like, if I'm in a drum line, the big picture is, how are we rehearsing? Am I doing the protocol correctly? Am I in the rehearsal, right? And then next, what am I getting better at, right? So then you narrow it down. Like, don't go to those little little details. Get the macro things, right? And you go from there. There's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis. Something I like from that book is you talk about when you can really focus on one thing at a time, it really puts you in the moment behind what you're doing, right? Because, you know, if you're thinking of a million things, if I'm worried about a paradiddle on beat 8 or whatever because I can't play paradiddles, I'm going to blow up beats 1 through 7. You know what I'm saying? But if I like really nail beat 1, maybe I can learn from there, and then I'll see what the real problem is. Maybe it wasn't the paradiddle in the first place. That's just where I was aware of the problem.